So what you're seeing in front of you right now is the state's labor exchange, MinnesotaWorks.net. I'm not going to go over how to register, and the reason for that is, if you're here today, you already are registered on MinnesotaWorks.net because that's how you registered for this class, by logging in. It is a very simple process, though. It takes about 5 minutes to register, and you do see that there are two sides to this registration process. There's the job seeker side and the employer side. One of the things I do want to point out, because I took this screen capture this morning, there are 96,024 positions open in MinnesotaWorks.net. There are only 14,677 active resumes. That means there's a 6.5 times, or there's 6.5 times more job seekers currently. And obviously we are at a very unique time in our state's and our nation's history, which is causing that. But the happy result for someone who's actively looking for work is there are jobs, more jobs than I have seen probably in my entire time with the state. Now, that does not mean that these are all jobs you're interested in or in your area, but I would challenge you to look at this site daily to see if there's anything that is of interest and something that you could potentially apply for. Now, you're not going to see jobs every day in MinnesotaWorks.net that are relevant to your job search. You should always use a multi-pronged approach. You should be using networking. If you're comfortable with social media, engaging with maybe LinkedIn or Facebook, there are other great job sites out there. Some people even find success at something like Craigslist. The one thing I'm going to promote about MinnesotaWorks.net is that every employer that's on our site is verified. I've been an employer in a different career who had an account on MinnesotaWorks.net. And I thought, wow, they're really serious about that, because I got a phone call and they had to verify that it was me and that I had paid into unemployment, that I had the correct credentials. Once I had done that, I posted a job and hired someone directly off MinnesotaWorks.net. I've also been a job seeker who has found jobs off that website. So I will tell you that I am fully promoting this from a standpoint of experience. I've been on the site for over a decade, and I think it is a very relevant part of anyone's job search. So let's take a look at kind of the ins and outs of it. Anything that you see that is blue is a link. So if you wanted to do some user training lessons, or if you wanted to register, or you can even look at jobs without registering. Further down on this screen, there would be a preview jobs. Now, what that is if someone doesn't wants to see if it's something they should register for, they can look at jobs without having an account. However, they're not going to get that how to apply link as part of that. So it's always better to register first. So we're going to log in. I'm going to log into my site, and I have two accounts. I have an administrator account now, but I still have my job seeker account. I keep both active. So if you're on the site, you want to refrain from using the back key on your browser. This site works better if you navigate internally, meaning that if I wanted to go from search for jobs to my resume to internships, I would use these links on the left-hand side. That just works better. When you're on the homepage, it's a really good idea each and every time to check if your resumes are getting views. We'll talk about how to put a resume on a little bit later, but if you currently have a resume on there, if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, and this is the resumes you have and how much movement they're getting. And by movement, I mean views. So you can have up to 5 resumes on MinnesotaWorks. The reason you do that is these are not resumes to apply. It's more of a profile to an industry. I mean, I'm not saying that people don't use their MinnesotaWorks resumes as part of their application process. You can do that. We'll talk about that. However, I'm trying to attract employers with my resume. So you'll see that my current resume, the one that I have, Viewable, has 542 views. That means it's shown up in employer searches 542 times since I last reset it. So if you are putting a resume out there that's not getting any views, that should tell you that you're not putting the right words possibly, or you don't have enough content. And I'll show you how to stylize your resume to meet the needs of employers as we go along here. But that's something you should check all the time. Also, you should make sure that your resume is viewable. If you have been logged out of the system for 6 months and haven't had any activity, your resume automatically goes into a non-viewable status. The reason we do that is we have two customers. We have the employers and we have the job seekers. And we don't want to be showing resumes of job seekers that aren't interested in work. So the idea here is making sure that you are logging in, and I log in every day. I just log in every day. I'm not looking for work, but I have found that if I keep up to date what's out there, it lets me understand, hey, should I try this? Or is this a once in a lifetime opportunity? I don't want to pass it by. I think of that as more passive job seeking. I just see what's out there. I've been working for the state for 10 years, plan on retiring from here, but who knows? Tomorrow isn't guaranteed in any job, so I want to keep up to date with what is out there and the employers that are posting jobs. And this is a great way of doing that. So what we're going to do first is talking about editing your account information. And this is one of the first big tips I'm going to give you. When you create an account on MinnesotaWorks.net, many people, including myself, do it very quickly. You know, just quickly type it in, and we want to get to the job, so we information. That is how employers are going to see you. So if you maybe didn't capitalize your first name, or put in a misspelling, or put in a fake email address, or an inappropriate email address, that might be how you're marketing yourself to employers. So the first thing you should do is click on Edit Account Information. And I've just got a fictitious one here. Make sure this is everything you would want an employer to see. So if you've got some misspellings, if you left some information out, make sure you're putting it in correctly. Another thing very important here is this. If you've served in the U.S. military, make sure you put, I don't care how far back it was, if you have served, take credit for that. Put, yes, you've served in the U.S. military. That can have a huge impact in the order in which employers see resumes. I was working with someone who had been retired from the military for decades. And I asked him, did you mark that in your MinnesotaWorks account? He says, no, that was so long ago, I don't even talk about that. You don't even have to talk about it in your resume if you don't want to, but putting it here will move your resume to the top of employer searches. I'll show you what that looks like from the employer side as we go along, but for right now, make sure that this is something that you want employers to see. So some of the mistakes I've seen are misspellings, or an email address that you use for personal reasons as opposed to professional, and not filling out everything that is relevant because you did it very quickly. Once you have an account set up, then you can go to the resumes link. Now, many people who have an account are just there for jobs. I think it's extremely important to put your resume on there also, because something to find my resume, I certainly want to actively seek for jobs, but putting a resume out there allows employers to find you. In the last year, I think I've got about 6 calls from recruiters from verified companies with good jobs that reached out to me directly because of my resume on MinnesotaWorks. And I tell you, that feels really good. It really feels good to, thank you so much. I appreciate your interest. Currently, I'm in a position, but I will put you down in as a possible contact should I be looking. It's certainly better than not having one on there. So let's talk about how you can have an effective resume on MinnesotaWorks.net. So I'm going to click on the resumes link here. And if you want to find if you currently have resumes, you can click on this drop down right here, and it'll show you which resumes you have. So if you have one on there and just want to edit it, you could select it and click edit, and then you can upload resume. All resumes on MinnesotaWorks should be working documents. You should never say, I'm done with that, because we all experience new things. We all create new skill sets. We all find about new things that were potentially marketable about ourselves, or new ways of defining what we do. So it's not a bad idea to look at your resume, especially if it's not getting hits, and see if there's anything you can update. However, what we're going to be talking about today is creating a new resume. And once you have a new resume, you can edit it also. So we're going to click on create or upload a new resume. And there's a few options you have here. You can create a resume right on our site, which is my recommended option. You can paste from another open application, which honestly you can do through Create a Resume also. Or you can do this. You can upload an existing document. Now, I understand why people would want to do that because it's easier. I have a resume and I don't want to retype it, so let's just throw it up there. The problem with that is no system does that perfectly. If you've ever experienced uploading a resume to an application for a job seeker, for a job from an employer, you'll find that it doesn't go into all the right spots and you have to do some editing and make sure that it's doing everything you want it to do. You can do that here too, but what I'm saying is if you create a resume step by step on our site and it does walk you through it, you're much more likely to have a resume that's going to meet the expectations of employers viewing it on our site. So I'm going to click on create a resume. And then the first thing we have to do is add a name. So in this case, I'm going to type in Baker. Now, the reason I do this is just for me. I've been a baker actually in a past life, but I've also been an event DJ. I have been a block tender. I have been, a manager at a nonprofit. You don't want all of those things on the same resume. You don't at least want to have the objective statement of all of those industries on the same resume because it can be confusing to an employer. Your objective on MinnesotaWorks is a very special thing, and we'll be explaining that. But think about what market are you trying to attract? What industry are you trying to attract with this particular resume? And then name it as such. Employers don't see the name of your resume. It's just associated with your name. So this is just for you. The reason we ask you to name it first is it's kind of like a database in that it saves as it goes. You don't have to complete your entire resume in one. You close out of any of the sections, it's saved. And that's why we give it a name at the beginning, so it has a place to put it. So once you've done that, you click on Save, and then you start building it. I'm just going to take a quick look. Okay, so if you see that you're getting clicks on your resume and it says that 100 people have viewed your resume and you're not getting any contact from someone who did that, I know that's frustrating. That a lot of people think that who recruited me option is where you'd find that. That's something completely different. You will have far more people view your resume than connect with you. And the reason for that is you just show up in searches based on a view. Once that search has been completed, they see a bunch of things, which we'll talk about when we look at the employer side. It does not mean that you're going to get a contact. The contact means that they looked at your resume, they found it of value, and they said, this is someone for me. And so we'll go along with that. I just wanted to acknowledge that question. What you're going to do from here is you're just going to go through these step by step, and you're going to enter this information. The first one we're going to look at is the contact information. So when you do the contact information, it's going to auto-populate from when you created the account. So this is where that maybe incomplete or bad information would be pulled into your resume. So this is where you can click on contact information right up here. Excuse me, I'm gonna go back one and change it like we had done from the edit contact information. You can also edit it right here. The purpose of this is making sure that they have a way of connecting with you. I have had on rare occasions an employer contact me and say, saw a great candidate, but there's no contact information. Most employers will not even bother with that. They will just move on to the next candidate. So make sure that if you're actively looking for work, you let them see your contact information. Again, employers on MinnesotaWorks are verified employers. So you don't have to worry about being scammed or anything else. Be aware of duplicate sites. This is Minnesota spelled out, works spelled out, .net, not MNWorks. Be very careful. You know, whenever you create a good product, there's always going to be someone that's trying to leverage it for, you know, not so nice means. So make sure that you're going to MinnesotaWorks.net when you or when you're looking for work. So the next thing we're going to be talking about is the most relevant or the most important thing I'm going to be talking about all day, and that's the objective statement. The reason it's the most important is because it's the most misunderstood. I teach a resume class. I've been teaching resumes for 20 years. I don't really care if you have an objective statement on your resume. I think sometimes it's a waste of space in your, let's say, working resume that you used to apply for. That objective might be something like seeking a rewarding career, utilizing my experience to exceed desired results. I think that's a waste of your time and the employer's time. So you can leave that off. What I do is I say something, if I'm going to put an objective statement on, I put the specific objective of applying to that job. So objective, welding position posted on company website ID 75384. And that's what I do on a resume I'm using to apply. Remember that MinnesotaWorks, we don't know who's looking at it. So we're trying to entice an industry. So make your objective statement speak directly to your experience in that industry. So I'm going to click objective. And by the way, it's a required thing to put on there. That's any of these stars make it required. So if you don't put it on there, your resume will not be viewable and employers will not be able to see it. So in this case, for the baker resume, notice it says talented baker with 15 years experience creating delicious cakes and pastries from simple to elegant, including wedding and specialty cakes. Here's the key, 15 years experience. If you do have experience or recent education or specific knowledge, put that in there so you separate yourself from people who say experienced baker or baker looking for work or looking for a job. I've seen some really bad objective statements that speak to your needs, which I get. Objective, it sounds like it's, you know, that's my objective. My objective is a great paying job that I can retire from. You want, make sure that you're speaking to what you have to offer someone. So you can maybe think of it more as a career summary, but because it's typically listed as objective on resumes, that's why it's listed such here. You can have a whole bunch, up to 2,000 characters, but employers initially only see the first 24 words or so of your objective statement. And the reason for that is we want to show them a list of relevant resumes so they can click on the one that entices them. And the next slide will show you what that looks like. So we're going to switch from the orange side of it, which is the job seeker side, to the green side of it, which is the employer side. Now, this is something you would only be able to see if you were an employer or here. So this is kind of a behind the scenes look at how employers find you on MinnesotaWorks.net. So when employers click on search for resumes, this is what they see. So on the left-hand side, there's search for resumes. These are going to be asked. They're going to be asked where they're looking. We don't want to give a very relevant resume to an irrelevant location, meaning that if on your resume you had said you're willing to work within 25 miles of, let's say, Winona, we don't want to send an International Falls your resume because that would be irrelevant to both of you. So when you answer that question, you'll see it coming up here in a little bit. Make sure that you put a zip code and a relevant zip code and a decent distance from that zip code that you're willing to work. I would love to work 5 miles from home, but I live in Twig, Minnesota. If you're aware of that, good for you. Not many people are. Twig is a very small town, and there's not a lot of jobs in Twig, Minnesota, and I've worked pretty much at every one of them. They're not on my career path, so I at least have to work 20 miles away in Duluth or 25 or 40 miles in Virginia. So if I say I want to work within 5 miles of my zip code, an employer doesn't even have the opportunity to turn down my resume because they won't see it. So make sure that you're putting out a decent distance that you're willing to work from the zip code you're in. Now, that does not mean that you have to accept a job 50 miles away simply because you wanted to be seen within 50 miles. So here I'm going to put in that they're looking for someone who's willing to work within 55802, which is the Duluth zip code. And really all they're going to have to do after that is they're going to have to put in the keyword searches. I'm sure you've heard of keyword searches. They're going to put in Word, Excel, and QuickBooks. Now, here's where it gets very, very specific. If you put on your resume that you knew QuickBooks or PowerPoint, and you put a space in between those two, between Quick and Books or Power and Point, they're not going to see that criteria because that's an incorrect spelling. So make sure you're spelling everything in the industry recognized way on your resume. Now, when you put things in with a comma, what that means is they are looking for this, this, and this. Now, there's a difference between and or. If I type in Word, Excel, QuickBooks, it has to have all three. If they typed in Word or Excel or QuickBooks, it could have any combination. It's kind of a strange thing how it works. We'll see it on the other side of it when we search for jobs ourselves from the job seeker side. But when they do that, when they click OK, they're going to see all of the resumes that are relevant, people willing to work within that distance who have those words on their resume. And here's how they're sorted. They're sorted first by what we call military service preference. If you did mark and have military experience, it's going to put you to the top of the list, and it'll have a little military flag there. So there's some employers that are very, very specifically trying to hire veterans, and it allows them to see that information. Here's the key for the rest of us. For the rest of us, it's now in order of your last login. Remember that I said that every single day I log into MinnesotaWorks.net? The reason I do that is, here's my resume right here. My resume is at the top of searches because I've logged in the most recently. Now, this is a screenshot from a few months ago. If I updated today, it would say the same thing because I am the most recently logged in person because I logged in right before our presentation today. Now, that doesn't do you any good if once you get to the top of the list and you have the relevant words, your objective statement says something that doesn't attract employers, like currently open to various positions and available to work. That doesn't entice an employer to click on that resume. That's their objective statement. Would you click on this one, currently open to various positions, or 18 years experience as a trainer in the technology field? If you're looking for a trainer, and that's my trainer resume, I'm hoping an employer will say that's a more relevant marketing piece. If they click on that ID, now it opens up my contact information and my full resume, and it leads to an employer contacting me, hopefully. Okay, now this, again, is a very passive way of looking for work. It's just one of the tools I have in my tool bag for job seeking. But I tell you what, it's been relevant in job searches I've done, and I think it's something all of us can do very quickly by adjusting our objective statement and getting a resume on MinnesotaWorks. So I do have several questions coming through here, and I will get to as many as I can. Most of these questions are going to be covered as far as filtering results, and that's the #1 question most people come into from the job seeker side. But I did want to show you the employer side before we jumped over to that. All right, now we're going to jump back over to the resume. Now that we've covered the objective statement and its importance, you just start filling in the rest of your job history and your education and those things. So I would click on the job history. You have to have at least one job in here, and use the space that's allotted. I'm sure you've heard that in many cases, a one-page resume is a good resume to apply for a position. 1 to 2 is just fine. I'm not a big believer in putting everything out there so an employer, has to sift through what's relevant. But here we don't know necessarily what's relevant specific to an industry. I mean, we know that here's the words of my industry, but we don't know specifically to an employer. So I'm a little longer winded on my MinnesotaWorks resume. I'm still going to speak specifically to baker's needs. Okay. I'm not going to put in DJing, or I'm not going to put in Alzheimer's care provider, because that's maybe not necessarily relevant to a baker's needs. I might have to put that work history in there to show continuity, but I'm going to put a lot of information on my relevant job history in here. And it might, if I were printed off, might be 2-3 pages. Again, you don't want them to have to read a book, but the more words, the more likely you are to get keyword matches. Don't create a resume that is strictly the keywords of the industry. You're going to have to back up anything you put in there, but we have a little bit more space to work with here. You have 2,000 characters for each of your jobs. I'm not saying you have to top out at 2,000 for everyone. That would be a bad idea, but make sure you're fully promoting what you have to offer. Now, there's a couple of different ways to do this. Unless you have a specific reason not to, I really like putting the start and end dates in there instead of putting months of experience. And the reason for that is many resumes are just not looked at if there's not dates of employment, especially for government work. Because in government work, it says you need to have a certain amount of experience or whatever. It throws them off in some cases where you'll say, I have 144 months of experience in this. Well, when was that? If you have a specific reason to do that, I understand. But if you don't, if you have fairly current work history, and in the time of the pandemic, anything within the last 18 months is pretty current. A lot of people are dealing with long-term unemployment right now. You are not alone on that. But if it's within the last 18 months, put the dates on. If it's 5 years out, that becomes a little more tricky. And that's a situation in which I would have a conversation with your local career force representatives to see if there are better methods of putting your resume together based on your specific set of circumstances. I'll be giving everyone the contact information for your local career force locations in the follow-up material that you'll receive by the end of the day tomorrow, along with, like I said, hopefully the recording of this presentation. All right, next off, we're going to talk about education. Now, you're going to notice here, education is not required. I'm going to say you should think of it as required if you have something to put there. The reason for this is it's a filter option for employers. If employers can filter based on GED or high school diploma, think about what you're doing to yourself. You have one, maybe you have one, and you think, well, I'm not going to list that. You don't list it, they require it, you've been filtered out of a job you are relevant to. Also put in some college. That's one of the options. If you have some college, because it's the degree obtained could be some college, okay? So I'm going to get to as many questions as I can. I'll pause when we get to job seeking, and I'll look through the chat to get to some of them, and then we'll hit as many as we can at the end. So put in whatever's relevant. Do not say you have a degree if you don't have one. You can just say working towards or whatever the option is there. Be honest. I do realize that when you were given a choice of this or this, sometimes there's a gray area in between. Make sure you are erring on the side of caution so that you're never caught with, well, you said you had this, and when I hired you, and I see that you don't, you can't prove it, and now I have to let you go because in effect you lied on your application or in your material. So I always err on the side of caution. Speaking of that, if you are in the process of just getting your job search together, one of the more difficult things is to locate your exact dates of employment. I know there's no easy answer to that, but a couple things to think about. One is call the former employer. I know that's not always possible, but call the former employer, even if that's a difficult conversation to have, and request your dates of employment. An option that costs some money is to go to the Social Security Administration. I think it costs like $100, and have them do an audit of when you've paid into Social Security. That's a long process for them to do. I think, like I said, I think it costs like $100. Hopefully, if you have to do this, you only do it once, and you get that information. The reason for that is when you put dates of employment on a application, that's kind of like that is a legal document. You're legally saying, I legally worked between this date and this date, and I verify that I have. Now, most of the time it's just, oh, I thought that was 2012. It was actually 2013. Well, if the job required a certain amount of experience, and that puts you on the edge of having it or not having it, that is grounds for termination. I've been involved in those audits as an employee. 7 years into my employment, my employer said, prove everything that you said on your resume. And that was scary because I couldn't remember how I came about those dates. Luckily, they were true, but it was very, very nerve-wracking for me because I had 7 years of equity built up in that company. And by equity, I mean I had been promoted 3 times. I wasn't having to reinvent myself and start from the bottom rung again with another company. I progressed 3 times, and now that was at risk because of my initial application and resume. So make sure that you're putting the most accurate information possible on your resume. And that's something you can do right now, starting to get it together. I'm going to include a link to a personal data record sheet that we have on careerforcemn.com that'll kind of help you to build that information. Once you have it, keep it in a safe location. You don't want to have to try to find this twice. We usually email it to myself. I email it to myself with personal data record or job history, or you put it on Google Drive or OneDrive or whatever, Dropbox, so that if you move, if you lose it, all you got to remember is your email account password and you have access to it again. Also, putting it on MinnesotaWorks.net, as long as you keep an active account, is going to be a permanent digital record for you. Okay, next up, we're going to talk about some of the optional things, and that is certificates, licensures, additional training. So if this, like I have a how to be a dynamic trainer certificate that I had in 2008. You got to ask yourself, is this something that still is relevant? Do I want to put it out there? But as a trainer, there's not a whole lot of opportunities to get a certificate or a licensure. So generally put that on there. I've been doing computer training for the majority of my career. So I have a Microsoft Office Specialist certification that I will put on till I'm done working on there because it doesn't expire, or at least when I took it, it didn't expire, and it validates what the skills I'm marketing. Sometimes we don't have an accreditation that we, through schooling or through work. There are opportunities to seek out these things. Some of them are free, very few of them are free. Some cost money. You think of it as an investment in your career. If you have a short-term training you are looking at doing to enhance what you can market about yourself, there are some opportunities through the Dislocated Workers Program. Occasionally there is funding available if you are unemployed through no fault of your own. I will include the link on how to connect with your dislocated worker counselor in your area to see if that is relevant. Now, what they're going to ask is, how would this certification benefit your job seeking? How would this enhance your career? So even though I would love to take a course on video editing, that is a really hard sell for me to say that would enhance my career. I could instead say there's an Excel course offered through UWS that is the one missing piece in jobs I'm applying for but don't have experience in. That's a possibility for funding, but it varies per situation. So I really recommend you make that connection to a dislocated worker counselor if there's something missing from your resume and what you're marketing to employers. So the next thing we're going to talk about is things that just don't fit anywhere else, and that's the notes section. In here, additional skills and notes section, you can put things in there that just don't maybe fit. You know, you had it in your resume, but it doesn't fit in our resume. It'll still be keyword searched no matter what. So put it in there. Just don't write an entire book to try to, to match every possible keyword. Employers eventually are going to read it, and they can kind of see through some of that stuff. You can put volunteer work in here also. Now, if volunteer work is really in line with what you do, you could put in your work history, just put volunteer position in parentheses. Be very honest about that, because if you're ever asked about it, it's much better to have started that conversation from this is volunteer work. You don't necessarily have to put all volunteer work on your resume, any resume, because volunteer work is a tricky one. It can have relevance because it shows a skill set that your work history doesn't. It shows what you've been doing during a time which you were unemployed. But if you're someone, and we all know someone like this in our life, who volunteers for everything, who's involved in 5 different organizations, as an employer, think of what that looks like. It's, where is there time for you to work? You've got a lot of irons in the fire. I don't know if you'd have time to work on weekends, work overtime. So put what it helps you on your resume, leave off what doesn't. As far as board memberships, There are board memberships that are specifically relevant to your work history, but don't try to cross-pollinate there. So if you have a baker resume, don't put in maybe fundraising as a board membership or volunteer activity. Put that into a nonprofit management resume. You can kind of mix and match, and that's where the notes and the volunteerism and the other activities, even certifications, can kind of jump between resumes. So as far as addressing age, you go back as far as you want on your resume. There are times where we leave things off. I go back 10 to 15 years on my resume. I don't want my resume to age me, because I could put work history from the 80s in there. And at this point, when you're putting work history from the 80s, an employer is going to look at that and say, some people from the 80s are now retiring. That may or may not be true. Who knows? I don't even want to raise the issue. So I'm going to put only history that shows what I can currently do for an employer. If it's really relevant to the job and it happened 25 years ago, that's an opportunity to put in additional skills. You could put other relevant work history and leave off the dates. So that's an option there. So the next thing we're going to talk about is another very important one after notes here. We'll skip over notes because we already covered that, is the location schedule. This is something that no matter how closely aligned your resume is with your handheld or Microsoft Word or whatever resume is with the MinnesotaWorks template, this will not autofill. And it's one of the big reasons people's resumes do not show as viewable, because you have to complete this required section, which is location schedule. This is where you tell an employer where you're willing to work. So if you're thinking about moving, or you're going to be moving this summer, or you're on the edge, maybe you have a couple different zip codes that you are looking at, but you can put 25 miles. I personally put 50 miles. The reason I do that is I live in a rural area, and I could go to the Iron Range. I could go to Duluth. I want to get opportunities from both ends. Doesn't mean I want to drive 50 miles a day, but I want to see opportunities within 50 miles. So bump that up a little higher than maybe you would think. Also, the desired type of work, I put regular or temporary. The reason that I put regular or temporary is some jobs that are temporary are what are called temporary to permanent, or temp to perm. And I don't want to filter out those temporary jobs simply because, well, I'll tell you, my career with the state started with a temporary job. If I had filtered those out, I wouldn't be sitting here today talking about this. It's crazy how little things have a huge effect in the potential trajectory of your career. And then full and part-time, even though I'm only looking for full-time, I put full and part-time because some temporary part-time jobs really are full-time jobs starting out. Not always, of course, but I put full and part-time. And then I put whatever work or desired work shift. Now, we did have a question about temporary jobs. Remote jobs. That is increasingly becoming part of it. We do have that option. However, don't just search for remote options, even if that's the only thing you want. And here's why. More than ever, this is becoming relevant to job search. More than ever, opportunities are out there. However, employers are very reluctant to list a job as remote only. And the reason is they have to train you in. That you have to prove to an employer in many cases that you can handle working from home, because I'll tell you, not everyone can. That's why places like United Healthcare, you start out for 6 months, I believe, and this could have changed, so don't quote me on this, in office for a job that eventually will be remote. If you only search for remote jobs, you may miss out on that opportunity. As far as someone had a question about zip codes. If you have any question, you do have 3 options here. So if you want to cast a wider net, you can put 3 zip codes, but when you put 50 miles within a zip code, that's not going to lock you within 50 miles of that zip code. In Twig, we have a specific zip code that only relates to the Twig general store. So if I said within 50 miles of the Twig zip code, that's going to get me Duluth, that's going to get me the Iron Range. So I hope that answers that question. So once you've done that, once you have completed everything, and it says required complete, you will have the option, something will pop up and will say, click here to make this resume viewable to employers. Make sure you do that, because if you don't, it's right here, click OK to let registered employers see your resume so they can contact you. Make sure you click on that. And that's kind of your fail-safe that, hey, I've completed everything. If you get through with the resume and you don't see that, you haven't completed one of the steps. So make sure of that. So I'll click OK on that. And now my resume will be viewable to employers. Okay, I want to jump right into searching for jobs. The reason I didn't do searching for jobs first is because that's what everyone wants to do. They want to look for jobs. I hope I've shown that there is a need to put a resume. It's relevant. It's beneficial to have a resume up there. If nothing else, it'll help you get your starter resume together through a wizard. And a wizard, which is what builds it for you step by step. And then you can export your resume and work on it further from there. But I'm going to click on search for jobs here. When you click on search for jobs, there's a lot of different options to do. And if you have your resume on there, one of the additional benefits is you can search by resume, meaning that it will look at your resume, look at the keywords on your resume, or look at all the words on your resume, and try to match them to jobs. Now, based on your work history and the available jobs out there, this may work very well, or it may not work at all for you, but it's something you can try. I've done it myself. It generally doesn't work as well for me, simply because there's not a lot of computer training positions out there. It doesn't mean there aren't keywords out there that match for other positions, but if I were an RN, I would get a really close match to a lot of jobs, because we're in a medical intensive labor market in my area, and that would match a lot of the keywords, so I'd get like 4-star matches. So if I choose that resume and I click on search, it's going to show me the type of work. Now, because that was a baker resume, notice there's a lot of restaurant and cook type of information that we can use. One of those questions, can we filter state and county jobs? You could through a keyword search. However, this is that multi-pronged approach that I really recommend. If you're interested in county and state jobs, or you're interested in a very specific employer, look here, that's great. And I suggest you do that, but also bookmark those pages and look daily. I'll tell you that there's been jobs that I never would have seen anyplace else other than the very specific website of that employer. Don't assume it's going to show up on LinkedIn, or it's going to show up on Indeed, or it's going to show up in MinnesotaWorks. I always have a top 5. Here's a top 5 employers that I am interested in working for. If 2 of them happen to be state and county jobs, bookmark their employment sites, not their website, their employment subpage. The reason I do that is it's quicker and easier. Once I find it, sometimes it's tricky to find the actual jobs on a website. Wait till you get to the actual website that has the jobs posted, and then bookmark that one. And then every day I go through those top 5, and they can change, based on what I'm looking for, what I'm feeling at the moment. But I look, and that way I get the most current information. What MinnesotaWorks allows me to do is see other opportunities as well. So another option we have is to search by zip code. So you can click on search by geographical location. And when you search by zip code, you're going to be able to choose counties. You can choose the zip code. There's a lot of different options you have for this. And what I recommend you do is play around with every single one of them and find out what works best for you. Because based on your work history and the jobs that are currently out there and the industry you're interested in, certain ones work better than others. And you'll see that based on the criteria I put in, here's the information for that information in that area. The next one is statewide. You can click statewide, and do notice there is a telecommute option. The telecommute option, again, is not going to show you all the telecommute jobs, but increasingly we're seeing employers put them on there. There's far more than that they're listing. And again, because they don't want to have a job that starts off as in person be put as telecommute, and many jobs are that way. So you can click on side and you can search that way. The most important one, and the one I want to spend the most time on, is, I'm going to go past this here. And I'll go back one. You have the option of searching by occupation. This can work good. I'm going to get eventually to the keyword search here, but you can click on find an occupation and you can choose different occupation groups. Now, all of these have a yeah, but exemption. And here's the yeah, but exemption. Yes, it's on here, but think about training positions. Well, is that a office work? Is that education? Is that, there's a lot of different things that could be put in. So don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Don't assume that employers are going to define your category of jobs in the same way you do. So try a whole bunch of different ones. I'll show you what works the best for me and what I have found has given me the most relevant results. And that is, I search by keyword. Now remember when I said the commas or the spaces in between words you treat as an and? Same thing here from the employer side to the job seeker side. When you type in something here, and I'll put in cook in the keyword search, it has to have cook in the job description for me to return a result. If I put Word, Excel, QuickBooks, it would have to have all three of those words exactly as I spelled them. Now think of what happens when you say, instead on your resume, and instead on a job posting, they put Microsoft Office. Or instead of welding, they put welder or welded. Think about the different ways people could describe what you do. Or in my case, I say trainer and they say facilitator. That's where you can miss out on a lot of opportunities. And that's why you should really play around with this keyword search. The way you find out what the keywords of your industry are is look at job postings, print them off. Look at jobs that you're interested in and highlight the words they use to describe the things that you can do. And if they describe them differently, use those words in your keyword search. So I could put trainer and I would type in or facilitator, and then I hit it from both angles. So in this case, I'm going to put in cook, and it's going to return a bunch of jobs that have cooks. This is how you filter down results. You're not seeing everything. Now, there's not really wild card options. I think they call them Boolean searches, the ors and the ands. You can try playing around with a whole bunch of different things. And by the way, there's new options being put out there every single day as far as job seeking. So if you go to careerforcemn.com, any updates can be shown on there. Also, there are updates that are put on the main homepage of MinnesotaWorks.net. So when you log in, it's going to show you like classes that are coming up. It also shows you updates to the website. So if we do have what are called wildcard searches coming up, which are like asterisks and question marks that allow you to do various different things, you'll have that new information as new tools become available. In my area, even in the wider Duluth area, I do something that seems really silly for someone who lives in the metro. I don't do any filters. I just say, show me the jobs. Show me all the jobs that are available today. So I leave keyword searches completely blank. The reason I do that is I have found that there are 1 to 2 pages of new jobs per day. So maybe 50 to 100 jobs that I have to look through. Now, the benefit to me of that is I don't miss out on any jobs based on my not knowing how they are described by the employer. Now, in Minneapolis, 3,000 jobs posted a day, whatever, that would be not a good job search strategy. So you're going to use keywords. But if you're in a more remote area, more rural area, try just doing a blank search before you try doing any filters. Also, I think a really cool thing to do is when you find some jobs that are relevant to you, then try finding that same jobs through a keyword search. And you'll find that you don't find all those jobs through that keyword search because of the words they are using are different than yours. And that's how you start building your searches. Find out how they're describing the work you do. Write those down. Keywords relevant to my industry. That's part of, I guess, kind of growing within your job search, finding out what works and what doesn't. If you're trying the same thing over and over again, you're not getting results, try something new. And if you click on any of these jobs, it's going to give you the full, here's how to apply, here's the job description, and you'll see that here in a minute. Someone said here, the keyword search really narrows the job description down and it's more likely to send you jobs that you are truly interested and qualified for. Absolutely, it does. The one thing I would recommend off that is, if you're not getting jobs off keyword searches, it might not be that there aren't jobs there. It might be that you're using the wrong keywords. So play around with them a bit. You can also do saved searches. There's a whole lot of things you can do on this website if you want to delve in a little deeper, and there are training videos on this. So if I wanted to save a search, there's even opportunities to have them email you notifications of new jobs that come in based on that saved search. And if you're trying it and you're like, hey, I'm getting 50 emails a day for jobs I don't want, you're going to want to opt out of that. So you might play around with a little bit and save those job searches and potentially put a notification on. You can always go back in and turn it off. But if you're anything like me, I get 100 emails a day. I would rather find these jobs myself. However, if you want them to come to you, that's another option. So here's what a job posting looks like. Now, you may see that one of these jobs, this one was saved as a favorite, there's not a whole lot of information on here. And that's because this particular job was auto-uploaded from maybe an agreement we had with Weston Minneapolis or US Job Bank or whatever. Sometimes when the jobs auto-upload to our system, this information may actually even exist. It's just not shown here. I mean, it's always better if we see the salary offered and the benefits and all that kind of stuff. Many employers don't list that for various reasons, but don't assume that it's not there simply because you don't see it initially. I always click on how to apply. Before I read too much into any job posting at MinnesotaWorks.net, even if they have a whole bunch of information, I always click on how to apply. And the reason for that is twofold. One, I'm going to get more information, and two, it's going to be in the original format they intended. Just like your resume may not upload to our website perfectly and go into the right spots, their job postings may or may not load perfectly into our format. So always look at it in the most appropriate format. And this, if you're logged into the system, will direct you to that job. And here's an example of what a saved search would be. And that's up here, the best pick. You can add any job to your best pick so you can look at them later. One other caution. If you find a job you're really interested in and think, I'm just not in the mood to apply today, or I've gotten an interview or whatever, you can put it in best picks so you find it, but be very careful of that. If it's a good job, trust me, there are thousands of people who look every day on MinnesotaWorks.net. You don't want to be the last one to apply. You don't know when that job is going to be taken off the system. If I find a job, this is a key to a lot of job search strategy, being able to readily apply. I'd rather be on time than perfect. Perfect and on time is great too. However, if you have all of your information together, you have your dates, you have maybe a sample application, you've got a sample resume that you can quickly tweak. When you find a job, being able to quickly apply is really important, because a job that you apply for or attempt to apply for after it closes is not a job opportunity. So you can put best picks, but think of it as, okay, when I'm job searching today, I'm going to apply for these tonight at the very latest. Some jobs will have full contact information, and that's awesome. I am a computer trainer. I show people how to look online. I will tell you the most effective job search strategy is to talk to someone. The more personal you make your job search, the more true leads and true connections you're going to develop. It's very frustrating to apply to a bunch of jobs and not hear anything. If an employer gives you, and you see this sometimes, you can apply online. You can apply it by mail, by phone. If you can stop in there, I know that's a little difficult right now, but if you can stop in there, what are you going to value more as an employer? Someone who sent a resume to an email address, or someone who walked in with their game face on and a pleasant smile and introduced themselves and handed a resume and said, very excited about this opportunity. I'm really glad to hear you're hiring. Most people take the easiest method, and I get why we do that, especially right now. if you're willing to go out of your way, put a mask on, and if they're open for business and drop off your resume, you've started that interview process already because you've already created a first impression. So not a lot of jobs allow for that, but if they allow for in-person or calling personally, take that option. You may eventually have to apply online also, but you've started that, so they're looking for that application amongst the other ones who simply submitted as opposed to called and submitted. Okay. All right, so there are a few jobs you can apply for directly off MinnesotaWorks. They're not very many that you can do that. That's a special arrangement we have with that employer. But in that case, if there's an apply through MinnesotaWorks, you can even copy and paste or create on the site a cover letter right on there. Oh, I like this. Good advice. I lost an opportunity to apply for a job because it was taken down the next day and my resume wasn't ready. Happened to me too. And boy, do I kick myself. I'm like, the what ifs, you know, what if I had that ready? I try not to dwell on it. I just think of that as a learning experience. And I always have a resume ready to go. Again, I'm not looking for work, but I always have one updated and ready to go because you never know what tomorrow is going to bring. I could be out of work tomorrow. I could be searching tomorrow. I try to create the infrastructure for me to hit the ground running on that. Last time I was unemployed, the job that led to this job became available before I thought I was ready to look for work. I was just like, you know, I got to get my stuff together. I got to get, you know, start calling people. And a networking opportunity came out and they said the state is hiring for this position. I happened to be at a job fair. I never would have seen this position. It wasn't posted anywhere that I would have found it. A networking opportunity came, the job closed that day. If I hadn't been ready to apply on time rather than perfect, on time, I wouldn't be sitting here today. So some things to think about as you go forward. There's a lot of different strategies in job search, but having a resume and an application, having the information to fill those out and create those is really important. So if someone reaches out to you directly through an application that you submitted, that's where the who recruited me is going to be, and you'll see those. Doesn't happen a lot off the MinnesotaWorks because it's not developed to do that for the most part. So don't worry if you don't see anyone under who recruited me. That doesn't mean that people aren't looking at your resume. I know we have some limited amount of time here, a lot to get through in an hour. There are volunteer opportunities, internships and apprenticeships. You can look at those on the left-hand side. You'll see these statewide. You won't see them as, you know, based on a zip code. And the reason is there's not a whole lot of them on there. Some internships are paid internships, so I would look there. Some internships are shown in the general jobs section also. A lot of the apprenticeships you get through union halls and different methods. Doesn't mean that if they're on here, they're not relevant. But if you're not seeing the apprenticeships you want, it's because in most cases you're looking in the wrong area, and there's some other boards and other methods you look at. You know, electricians have a local union hall, and so do construction and laborers, and look at those options also. The other thing that's new to the site that changed since the first time we've done this is we used to have other links to other sites. The site that we have now is CareerForce. So if you're not on careerforcemn.com, a lot more options there for enhancing your job search. There's a lot of opportunities there. There's training opportunities. There's a lot of assessments you can take right on the site that'll help you, like for interest assessments and kind of like personality profile type things. I think it's a really good idea to do those because it will help you when you get to those sections when you're doing an application. They may ask you to take a survey or a personality profile or whatever. The more you take, the more you'll understand how to answer them. Generally, people answer how they think people want you to answer as opposed to what is the truth, and that can kind of trip you up. So I highly encourage you. There's 3 on our site right now at careerforcemn.com. Oh, excellent. Someone validating CareerForceMN. There's a lot to get through. And by the way, a lot of the employment sites like ONET and various ones, and I'll send you the links to all of them that I have. There's a lot to get through, and they can be very overwhelming. My take is take it one step at a time. There is not a way for a question to see which employers have viewed you. I know that would be great. I would love to see it, But from an employer standpoint, they want to be able to look at resumes without having a whole bunch of people call them saying, well, why did you take my resume? It showed up in your result. I get why we want, but I also understand why employers don't want and why that option is not there. So that ends up what I have to do, and I apologize for going a minute over. I will save the chat file. I'll take a look at it. If there's any additional questions that has to be taken out, I'll reach out to you directly. But like I said, a recording of today's presentation will be made available. It'll be a YouTube link that you can just click on and look at your leisure. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you all very much for attending today. I hope you learned a couple of new options. Even if you've been on MinnesotaWorks for a long time, there's always something new to learn. I learn new tips and tricks every time I teach this class. So thank you all very much for your time, and I wish you the best of luck in your job search.